there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Earth Station One podcast. And it's movie review night again. And man, this is the second part of was it Barbenheimer or Oppenbarbie or whatever you want to try to call it. It was real interesting of a weekend to go see movies. And I think it was the busiest I've seen a movie theater this year. And so far this, other than Mario, I think this has been like, the most drawn I've seen and sold out shows. And, when I wanted to go see the different movies, because I didn't do them both on the same day. So it was interesting to be able to, try to find the different films, and had to go to check out 3 different movie theaters because they were selling out for all the different movies between Barbie and now this film we're reviewing tonight, Oppenheimer. And it's awesome that we're able to do this. And it is Christopher Nolan at his best, and it is going to be an interesting tale to talk about. And we've got a great crew to talk about it. We're doing movie reviews. So, of course, Ashley Pauls is here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm very sad that I couldn't fully participate in the Barbenheimer double feature podcast. I'm planning to go see Barbie later this week, so I'll get my review up. But I'm glad I get to talk about Oppenheimer with you all.
I'm glad you're here, and at least you got to join us for one of these.
Yes.
And so it's pretty cool. And joining us for the first time, Lauren Knight is here. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Yes, I'm very, very excited to finally be here. And I also did Barbenheimer, but I did them in reverse, and I also did not see them on the same day. I saw them back-to-back days, but I did Heimer first, and then I did Barben.
Ah, there you go. So, and I think you probably appreciated it a little bit more. You needed something to lift you up after seeing this one. And
yeah, I agree. People were saying to see Barbie first, and I personally disagree, but
that's okay. That is good. It's good to have you here. You want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself since it's your first time with us tonight?
Oh, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Knight. You can find me on all the socials and Letterboxd at That Movie Is Fine, which incidentally is also the name of my own podcast that I have with my friend Erin Hudson. And we review kind of like cult classic movies. We revisit movies, that people, haven't maybe thought about in a while, or that we think might deserve reappraisal, or maybe not a reappraisal. And let's see, I'm a film programmer and a film booker, and I own my own events company. So yeah, that's me.
She's pretty amazing, folks. We've been trying to get her on the show for how long have we been doing the podcast? 13 years now. So
I've just been so busy.
Yeah,
she just was waiting for Barbenheimer.
What goodness. It is great to have you, though. And
Thank you. It is so great to finally be here.
And of course, Mr. Mike Gordon is with us once again.
Howdy.
Ready to talk about a bomb of a film?
Yes, it's a bomb, or the bomb, let's we'll make that distinction depending on your feelings about it. It's been kind of one way or the other with people, but considering how many people went to see this, we like to start off with the box office, and of course it's just been crazy with the marketing of this, as well as the sort of grassroots effort, or I don't know what you call it, phenomenon really, that is Barbenheimer. Now we'll see if it lasts more than a weekend, but thanks to nothing. I mean, it wasn't the studio's doing, because goodness knows there's not a lot of good blood, let's say, between Warner Brothers and Universal, especially when it comes to Christopher Nolan and Barbie. Barbie was a project that started at Universal and ended up at Warner Brothers, and of course, Chris Nolan, this is the first movie that he's made outside of Warner Brothers in I think since Memento, really. So this is kind of a big deal. They were going against each other, at least studio to studio, but the people, nope, they wanted Barbenheimer. They wanted it together. And this is not the only movie. I mean, it's been packed this year, but this has not been the only 2 movies that have come out the same weekend. We had last month, I think we had Flash and Elemental come out at the same time. They didn't have quite the spark that nobody wanted to see like Flashamental or whatever you wanted. There was no
Flash and
like
mental,
kind
that
of
will be hard to get rid of my head now. Thanks.
there's no kind of merging, like kind of fun thing. I think just because both of these movies were ridiculously different and obviously counter programming, and yet there was something about it that just kind of tied them together in a way that I think a lot of people appreciated. The fact that both of them were, I don't want to say original movies, because obviously one is a biopic, a historical, and another one is based on a very popular toy brand. So it's not like they're completely original efforts, but these are not sequels. They're not superhero movies. They're not like franchises that we've seen over and over and over again. And to that end, Oppenheimer, I think they projected it anyway, to gross about 45-50 million. I think thanks to Barbenheimer and the effort, I mean, it grossed over 80 million, which I think is a huge success for Warner Brothers and Christopher Nolan and everybody involved. Of course, Barbie blew out the weekend, as
fully expected, though.
Fully expected. But the fact that Oppenheimer did as well as it did, this is not an action movie. This is not something that people consider summer fare, right? This is I mean, the only reason that it's been released in the summer, I think, is because Christopher Nolan has a wonderful track record when it comes to summer movies. Dunkirk was released in the summer. Tenet was supposed to be released in the summer, although, the pandemic had a lot to do with that. Ashley, any thoughts about the release of this movie, box office wise, and the phenomenon that happened?
Yeah, no, I think, like you mentioned, the grassroots campaign of fans to create this hashtag Barbenheimer, I think definitely played a role in lifting both these movies at the box office. But based on what critics are saying, both are good movies. So it will be really interesting to see what their staying power is. But yeah, it has to be exciting for Christopher Nolan when you talk about a movie that's R-rated, 3 hours long. So theaters can't pack in quite as many showings, and the fact that it did so well, I think, is just great and is encouraging to me as a film fan, that I think there still is an appetite out there for in-theater movies, but it really needs to be an event, and people need to feel compelled, like, this is worth my time to spend out and go spend my money to go see it in a theater. So hopefully studios are taking notice, like there still is a market out there for theatrical films, but people will show up for something that's high quality, or that really seems like an event that they need to see on opening weekend.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And as you pointed out in an article, and even here on the podcast a little while ago, we have had very little of that this summer. I mean,
Yes.
all the big, quote unquote, big events that everybody thought was going to be the big deal this summer, a lot of them just fell flat.
Yeah.
Back on the box office and, with audiences.
Yeah, I would not have guessed that Barbie and Oppenheimer would both outperform The Flash and Indiana Jones opening weekend, but here we are. So definitely not something that I saw coming. So I'm tossing my predictions out the window by this point, but hopefully this is a sign of good things to come, and these movies will have some staying power, and we'll get to see more creative and thought-provoking films like this one.
Well,
It'll
I'm sure
be
the
very
studios
interesting to see how much egg we do end up on our face.
Oh yeah, I'm dreading the summer review podcast because I know it's not going to be pretty for me.
Yeah, well, it wasn't pretty for Hollywood. So,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that they're already trying to think of how they can recreate this this phenomenon. Of course, it's going to be canned and probably won't work, but that's not going to stop them from trying to repeat this. Lauren, I'm curious from you, like what did you notice about the box office and how unusual of an event this kind of thing was?
I think meme culture cannot be underplayed for how strong the turnout was. I mean, you couldn't have two more opposite movies released on the same weekend. I am not as optimistic as Ashley is about lessons studios are going to learn. I'm more in your camp, Mike. Like, people are going to try and manufacture, like, okay, do you remember Morbius, right? And everyone was like, it's Morbin time. And then it got like, it was out of theaters. And then there was like a campaign to bring it back into theaters. And so Sony like listened to the fans, but then no one went, right? Like, it's kind of the reverse of that in a way. And I think, I mean, I'm excited because Oppenheimer would normally seem like a December release. Like it would normally seem like one of those New York, LA releases in time for like Oscar season, you know, and then everyone else would get it in like January. So I think the fact that it's Christopher Nolan is a huge selling point. There was someone on Twitter today who is optimistic that this bodes well for Killers of the Flower Moon. And I don't agree. I don't think it's going to translate as well. Even though Scorsese is a draw and is a name, I don't think it's going to have the same like cultural cachet. And if it's the only movie coming out that weekend, or even if there's like an animated movie, it's not the same.
Right.
It's not the same. And I think women have always been discounted as well. And I think Barbie is showing that women are eager to come out to the movies and want something to come out for, and that we have income to spend. I mean, I remember even when Girls Trip came out, I was working at a movie theater then, and we had sellout showings of all of these white ladies and soccer moms coming to see Girls Trip just to have a good time and like hang out with their friends and drink margaritas and things. So I think the female demographic cannot be discounted, but I don't think any pertinent lessons are going to be learned. I think studios are going to learn like all the wrong things. And like you said, Mike, they're going to try and manufacture, you know, they're going to form their own 2-word like moniker, you know, like Benifer. You know, it doesn't work if Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez create their own nickname. Like you can't create, studios can't create a nickname. It was the internet that came up with Morbid Time, you know? So yeah, I think I'm excited for what this means for theaters though, because truly theaters have never been this busy all year. And even last year, I feel like, not entirely remembering everything that came out last year, but still working in the theater industry, I mean, it was not busy like weekend to weekend. So I think theaters really, really need this, and hopefully both movies will have a nice set of legs on them.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, we've got Haunted Mansion coming up this weekend, and we'll see if that cuts into it. And I know that Tom Cruise is just nipping at the butt, like, hey, I want to come back to give me some more of my premium screens back because I want more of those, right? But I don't know if he's earned them based on Mission Impossible's first weekend. So they might be like, hey,
week, though, that's the thing. There was only a week for Mission Impossible.
Right. I know that he wants them back. He was like, no, I because I think he's kind of surprised by this whole thing too. But because he thought, I am the Maverick. I am the savior of the cinema. People will come in droves to see my next movie. And they were like, yeah, we're good. But
I saw it, Tom.
we did too. And we enjoyed it.
We like him. We really, really like him.
But let's get into the movie itself. I'm eager to talk to Ashley. I like I said, I read your review online already, but I know spoilers, and we will be spoiling the movie too. So if people haven't watched Oppenheimer, I mean, I know it's based on historical events. Bomb does go off, and things like that. But we will be spoiling the movie itself. So if you really want to be surprised or want to have your viewing unspoiled, feel free to go see the movie, and then 4 or 5 hours later, you can come back and listen to us all talk about it. So, Ashley, how did you feel about Oppenheimer when you came out after that long 3-hour?
Yeah, so I was really looking forward to this one. Christopher Nolan is a director that I've really enjoyed following. He's my husband's favorite director. So naturally, this was on my list of most anticipated movies of the year. What's interesting about this movie is that it is really long. Like it's 3 hours, and just thinking, there might have been some places where he could have tightened it up, but yeah, I never felt bored or antsy while watching it. Like I felt that what I was seeing on screen was compelling. Less of the film was about the Manhattan Project itself than I was expecting. I thought it was interesting that it kind of goes through some of his early life and then what happens to him later with the pseudo trials and how
his trials legacy... that are not trials, right?
Yes, yeah, trials with air quotes for those listening for audio only, but just fascinating. And it's important to study this period of history because it truly it was a world-changing event. And I think what makes this film so great is that Christopher Nolan is able to take the genre of a biopic, which can sometimes feel kind of dry and not always exciting, but he makes it really compelling the way he shoots this film with his cinematography. The sound design is just incredible. I mean, when you see the atomic bomb test go off and then you have to wait that period for then the sound to come in, and then throughout the film where you can hear the people stomping on the floor, and as he hears it and it sounds kind of like a bomb, the countdown going off, and then just how that comes to symbolize is like the horror and the existential dread that he's feeling. The music is great too. It just felt like a really well put together package. And then all the performances, there are so many famous faces. I feel like I could have put together a Hollywood bingo card before watching the movie and then check it off like, oh, there's Kenneth Branagh, there's Matt Damon, and
especially people who he's worked with before.
Yes. So, but playing real historical characters, and just the fact that this movie is definitely not a feel-good film. It challenges you. It kind of forces you to sit with and think about this catastrophic historical event, which we're still discussing years later in the light of World War II, was an ethical decision made. And it's important for us to continue to discuss these things because unfortunately the threat, unlike Oppenheimer originally believed, the threat of nuclear war has not gone away. So there's so much to unpack in this film, but I think definitely a great movie. And I'm excited that a lot of people went to see it this weekend.
Quick question, because I know we usually talk about like expectations and things going in about what you're familiar with and what you're not. Were you familiar with Oppenheimer's story in any detail before going into this? Was it a education as well?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought I was familiar with him in the Manhattan Project. Years ago, we took a family vacation to Los Alamos, New Mexico, and then toured some. So it was really interesting to see the film too, like some of the sites that I remembered. Knowing Christopher Nolan, I would not be surprised if he filmed on location in some of those historical settings, but it was really interesting to see some of the settings that I recognized from going on a vacation there as a kid. And yeah, there was a lot I learned that I didn't know, especially about, again, his so-called trials with, and then just some of like, just how the whole team was put together. And it was fascinating. So even though I felt like I knew some about the history going in, there was more that I learned. And as soon as I walked out of the theater, I wanted to start Googling and seeing more about the history. So which I think is a good thing for a film like this to do.
Absolutely. Lauren, what about you? What's your history of, I mean, your knowledge of the historical event, as well as your feelings about Nolan as a filmmaker going into the movie, and then were you satisfied coming out?
So I knew less about Oppenheimer than it sounds like Ashley knows more than me, but like I knew who J. Robert Oppenheimer was. We did study, the Manhattan Project and some of that like in school, especially as it pertains like when you cover the World War II section of your textbook, but that was largely it, just kind of knowing who he was and that he is, the father of, nuclear warfare. But I really enjoy Christopher Nolan films. I didn't love Tenet. I did see it in theaters. I did have issues with the sound mixing in there, which I did not have in Oppenheimer. There were only a few lines of dialogue where my brain was like, wait, what? But it didn't. Tenet, you miss a key story point if you can't hear the movie. Like it's very but like I love Following, which was like Nolan's first like film foray. Like I love that movie. I love like the first half of Interstellar. I enjoy Christopher Nolan just to see what he's going to do next, right? Even if something doesn't quite hit with me. For Oppenheimer, I was excited, but it was not at all my most anticipated movie of the year. That was actually Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. But I was excited to kind of like join the hype, right? And not miss out on 70 millimeter IMAX screenings and miss out on like the Barbenheimer, like thing that was happening, cultural thing that was going on. On my podcast, we rate movies if they're less than fine, or more than fine, right? And it's just like something fun that we do. I feel like I saw a completely different movie than the majority of people online or that I'm friends with, because I thought Oppenheimer was fine as a movie. It didn't blow me away, no pun intended.
We intend to pun around these parts. So it's okay.
I think I wanted a different movie, and that's on me, and that's something that I have to reconcile. I think I wanted more about the repercussions of like atomic warfare and things, and less about like I could have done kind of without his early years, even though the poisoning of the professor is like a thing, a thing that he actually did. I was reading a review today. Sorry, my brain just like stopped working and I was trying to figure out what to say. I was reading like a review today where someone was like, let's talk about that ending of Oppenheimer. And I was like, what is there to talk about in the ending of Oppenheimer? Like, it doesn't end on a cliffhanger. Like, I don't really quite understand.
Yeah, it's not like Inception.
Right. It's not Tenet. It's not. So, but it was like, let's talk about that like chilling ending to Oppenheimer. I did not leave that movie crying. I did not leave that movie emotional in any way. That movie did not affect me. And I know that probably sounds weird, but it was fine. Like, I don't know. I'm in the minority because I didn't give it like 4, 4.5, and 5 stars like on Letterboxd.
Well, I've seen both Letterboxd and other places. I've seen the pendulum swing. So I for everybody, it seems like I've seen that has called this his best film, stroke of genius. I've seen the other end that say like this is his worst and it's his horrible.
I don't think it's his worst by any means. I think it's almost a Tarantino.
You sound like you're right like in the middle.
I'm in the middle. It's kind of like a Tarantino situation for me, where like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is probably his masterpiece of a film, but it's not, in my opinion, his best film, right? Like personally, it's not his best, but like cinematically and just subjective or like objectively, it's the best. And so I can see that for Oppenheimer, where like, if this was his swan song and the final movie that he ever makes, like what a way to go out, right? Like I can respect that. But the cast was constantly like a rotating door. You don't get to know any of the characters except for Oppenheimer. Like you don't get to know, like Florence Pugh is absolutely wasted. Emily Blunt is almost wasted, except for like the quote unquote trial scene where she's like, oh, I'm sorry, 16, no, 17, no, 18 years ago. Like that part was so good. But it's constantly like, oh, hey, it's that guy. Oh, we don't see that guy again. Oh, hey, it's that guy. Oh, we don't see that guy again. Like, I think it was like a who's who, as far as like, oh, look at all the people that want to be in this movie and people that I know and that I always work with. And that also didn't really work for me. Who's the major guy that actually ran the Manhattan Project? It wasn't actually Oppenheimer. He was the guy that did the like test bomb in Los Alamos. The Sons of Bitches guy.
Yes.
I didn't even know that guy was in the movie. Someone had to tell me who the actor was that played him. So I think I just wanted something else. out of the movie. And like, as a movie, it's more than fine. Like, as a crafted film, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's more than fine. But as an enjoyment, as a movie that tries to like pull at your emotions and really get you to like think, I was not left with that.
Okay, that's fair. That's absolutely fair. And I'm, that's something that, yeah, I definitely want to hear more of, and we'll get to hopefully some more details. But Mike, how did you feel about it?
It's interesting because I've studied Oppenheimer in the past through, going out to Los Alamos and going out to, into studying, the Smithsonian, and, because you go to the Air and Space Museum, they have the Enola Gay and, all that type of stuff. And so you read up all about it, and it's just interesting the cherry picking of his life that they did through this and everything. And it's a typical Christopher Nolan type film, because present time is color. That's what he did with Inception and such. Anytime they went into a different period or a different time, it was black and white. That's what they did with this, both with future and also with the past. And it was very well done. Agree with what Lauren said. The characters were rushed, way rushed, and it was fascinating though, because yeah, you were there to focus on Oppenheimer, and you saw him at different stages in his life. You saw him in the future when he was being offered, the job at Princeton, and then he was then being, then they went further back when he was trying to join the Communist Party, and and then or unionize the professors at Berkeley. And it was just real interesting, the hopping and the skipping, and that was confusing to some parts. And Christopher Nolan, bless his soul, in past films, his audio sucked big time and everything. This one, I didn't find it as much. It was very easy to follow and such. I still would have loved to have subtitles on it, though. I thought, that always, whenever we watch any kind of movie or TV show now on streaming, it's always having, subtitles on, just, not because of accents or anything. It's just easier sometimes to understand some of the dialogue. And I think that could have benefited in this film and everything. I did think, the actors, I loved the actor they had with, who played Oppenheimer. Petty Drenfell was just amazing. And to see that actor as Oppenheimer it was great. I think he acted the crap out of it. And you also had Robert Downey Jr., and you thought he wasn't a bad guy at first. And, then, it was interesting because Judy and I we had like a 45-minute ride home from the movie theater that we had seen it at. And we were, the whole way she was like on Wikipedia or other websites reading about all the different characters, and we were just discussing it. And that's a sign of a good movie when you can do something like that. And did I walk out of that movie theater with a giddy feeling? Oh, hell no. No, not at all. It's not that type of film. But it was like that was like a movie I walked out of going, okay, this makes sense. I liked it. And I liked the portrayal of some of the characters and some of the actors. But I think, overall, I think, the whole thing about the affair that he went back to, kept on going back to his ex-wife. And, and it's just like until she committed suicide. And it was interesting. I thought that was rushed. I thought, him getting involved with his second wife. And it was just like, oh, out of nowhere. And then for them to announce later on, oh yeah, I was sleeping with this other person. It was like, oof, where did the hell did that come from? So it was just like, okay, that was a little tough. The one thing I loved about this movie, and I'm going to come out and say it, is there was no CGI. It was all practical effects.
Yep.
And for them to have to do that explosion with practical effects was pretty damn amazing and everything. And I remember seeing the actual, test films that they did for the actual atomic bomb blow at Los Alamos. They showed what it looked like, and they couldn't come close to it with practical effects, but they did a really, really great job. And that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, certainly a lot there. It's funny because it's and I'm not disagreeing with any of you, but it's just so funny to hear like, oh well, this felt rushed, it's a 3-hour movie. Like how can anything feel rushed if there's like a 3-hour movie? So I mean, like how can you expand on, oh, let's expand on that. Oh yeah, you want to sit there for like another 3 hours?
Wait
But
till the director's cut, it'll be okay.
yeah, I'm sure. But all right, so I'm a Nolan fan as well. Ever since I saw Memento on the big screen, the first time it came out, I was like, this guy is brilliant. I've followed him. Used to be religiously, not so much anymore, but it used to be religiously. And this is a interesting movie. In a lot of ways, it's got all the Nolan tropes. I mean, he likes to film in IMAX. He likes to film on film. He likes to use Cillian Murphy. He likes to use Matt Damon. He likes to use, all these other actors, these secondary actors that fit in here. Traditionally, his female characters are not great. So I mean, it's got like a lot of like check boxes. Yep, that's a Nolan movie. That's a Nolan movie. That's a Nolan movie. But I think I mean the examination and the profiling that he does on this one person is something that I don't think I've seen him do before. And it's a focus. It's almost like he shows Oppenheimer, and then yes, there's all these bodies that are orbiting around him that, yeah, they're interesting and they're played by interesting actors. So it's like, oh, I'd like to spend some time on that planet. Nope, can't, because we're focused on this one, right? The 3 hours flew by for me. There was never a point where I was like, ooh, I need to, like, I'm looking at my watch, I'm doing this or whatever. When it was over, I was like, that's it already. Like, I was really surprised how engaged I was in this. Does it need to be in IMAX on 70 millimeter? No, but I wish all movies were, because it's a great experience. So, I mean, for people to say like, oh, it doesn't need to be, it's like, it's amazing when they are. Like, yeah, but you don't see any big action sequences. But sometimes just watching Cillian Murphy's face for like a few minutes is engaging on that level, I've heard, pendulum swing the other way and say like, hey, the bomb sucked. Like, it was just like, it was so disappointing that did not seem, they even got the mushroom cloud wrong, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I thought it was great. I love the effect of like, ooh, let's watch the visuals, and then boom, the audio hits, and everybody like, I mean, that was an impact that I thought in the IMAX theater I was in. I mean, you felt it, like you felt it when there was an impact. So it worked for me on those levels. I don't know my history well enough to know if Lewis Strauss was a really bad guy and really did orchestrate all those things. I don't know enough about a lot. I mean, certainly, when it comes to advanced physics, actually, I'm sorry, when it comes to rudimentary physics, when it comes to introductory physics, I will fail every time. So does a lot of this go like right over my head? Yes, but I get it. I've watched Star Trek enough. It's just mumbo jumbo to me anyway, right? It's like, okay, yes, bomb works. We know, like it. The only thing that's impressive, the only thing that makes this more impressive is that it's real. It's based on real events. It's based on real physics. This really happened. The struggles that Oppenheimer goes through in this movie from the very beginning when he's having the nightmares till the very end about whether this was the right thing to do, whether he should have done more or less, whether he should have gotten these people involved, that people like the, what he was doing it for, et cetera, et cetera. He's a very complicated man. He's not a saint. And yet I still felt compelled by his dilemma, multiple dilemmas going through this movie. And I think that I don't know if I've ever seen Nolan portray that as well as he does in this movie. Like, to watch a man actually just struggle with an endeavor and the after effects of it. And not just the after effects of the bomb, because we never really see that, but we know, I don't need to see like what happened on Hiroshima. I've seen the footage of Hiroshima. Like, I don't want to, like, I'm not paying $25 to see that on a big website. Like, that's gonna really upset me. And I get it, I mean, he feels it, and I believe he feels it. So I'm kind of, at the end of the day, along with Lauren on this one a little bit. I like it a little bit more than she does, but I don't think it's Nolan's best movie. But I don't think I think it's better than fine, but I don't think it's like, I mean, there's a lot of things that he could have done better, different, whatever. It could have been a more compelling story, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe juggle a little bit, maybe reduce some of the cast a bit. I mean, I know it's a big project and he likes to get everybody involved and all that kind of stuff, but it is kind of confusing, especially when they're all like kind of look the same and you kind of get guys confused with one another. They all have those nice 40 haircuts, like with hats and whatever and suits. And you're like, kind of like, okay, it's like, oh, Casey Affleck, I know that guy. Like, like, okay, he stands out, but it's like, it's Rami Malek and Josh Hartnett do great work. So I definitely appreciate the performances here, which is not usually something I say in a Nolan movie. I don't usually come out of a Nolan movie going, man, I think that guy should win Best Oscar because that was a hell of a performance. Usually Nolan is much more interested in, in this one too. He's like, I'm telling storylines from 3-4 different periods, and I'm going to mix them all up in a blender, and you have to guess which one is which. And yes, I'm going to change the black and white or color or the aspect ratio and here and here and here, and you just have to keep up. And it's like it's sometimes it can be kind of tricky, but it's also kind of fun. I mean, that's the thing about Chris as well, I think, is that he never goes, hey, audience, you people are stupid and I'm going to spoon feed you. He's like, no, this is the stuff that interests me and I'm going to tell it this way. And I hope you can keep up with it. And I hope it's interesting for you. And that was enough for me. So that's my overall feel. Ashley, was there anything else about the movie that you wanted to point out, like good or bad?
Yeah, well, I am going to be very shocked if Cillian Murphy's name is not included on the Best Actor list come award season. Just a great performance. One of the scenes that really stood out to me is where he's walking into the main hall, the celebration at the end, when everyone's all excited for him, like the project has worked, but he takes a moment to realize, like, my project has worked and I have brought this apocalyptic weapon to the world, and where it flashed back and forth between people cheering, people screaming, seeing some of like replications of what the effect of the bomb would have been was just really, I mean, it really just made me stop as a viewer and just really think about what he was going through in that moment. I thought was very compelling, and he did a good job. And I liked that I agree that I think this is some of Nolan's most nuanced character work. I like that he gave, I mean, it would have been nice to see Emily Blunt maybe get to do a little bit more, but that she just wasn't the stereotypical like 1940s housewife, like, oh, everything is good and I'm just supporting my husband. Like, he portrayed some of her struggles and how she had her own flaws and things like that too. So there could have been more that she got to do, but I did appreciate that he worked some of those layers into it. And yeah, it just, seeing this film makes me even more excited for Nolan to keep pushing himself and trying new things. And I like that he's not just a stagnant director. Like, this is a completely different film from Tenet. Both still feel like Christopher Nolan films, but I like where he's pushing himself, and I can't wait to see what he does next.
Absolutely. I think to your point, the scene where, they've just used the bombs, and he's talking in front of the crowd or whatever, and they're stomping their feet, and it's amazing. And he's like, oh man, how do I reconcile, how do I feed into this crowd? Because I really just feel like, we just killed a bunch of people, right? Like,
right.
he knows that, and yet, he can't say that, but instead, so he's saying things like, I bet the Japanese didn't like it, like, and like the crowd's going wild, and he's like, you can tell he's just not feeling that, but it's we're at war. I mean, it's a whole complicated issue. It's not as simple as like, oh, we just killed a bunch of people, shame on us, right? Like, these are decisions that some of which he didn't make, or he wasn't the only one. He wasn't the guy who actually said that, like, drop the bomb here. But I did find that scene very powerful. And regarding his wife, I did find some of the scenes that she had really powerful too. At the end, when he's getting his award as he's older, and that guy, the H-bomb guy, comes over to shake their hand, and she won't. Not only will she not shake her hand, but they show her, and she's getting ready to spit in the guy's face. You can see it, and but it looks, I mean, it's really, really a fun scene.
She does it with dignity, but she like stares him down.
Yeah, you're like, if you don't move pretty soon, you're gonna get spit on.
Yeah.
Lauren, what about you? What's something else about the movie, good or bad, that you took away from it?
Real quick, the scene that you're talking about with Benny Safdie, is, I think Teller was his last name. That actually really happened with Kitty. She refused to shake his hand, and he said he went home. He said he went home and cried that Kitty had like, deflected him so much. So like that was actually, I really liked that, and I really liked Benny Safdie. I do agree that Murphy should be in the Oscar conversation. I think Robert Downey Jr. also should be in the discussion. I think he was fantastic, in my opinion.
He's so good. Doesn't he just make it look easy?
It was so good. I was really excited to see something like that from him, because we haven't seen a lot of that since he's been doing, Iron Man, and he's a great Tony Stark, don't get me wrong, obviously.
Sure.
But, going back to like Chaplin and like Less Than Zero, like, he can act, like, he has talent, and not just like, and Tropic Thunder, like, he can do comedy, like, he is so good. And I'm hoping now that his time with Marvel is done, he'll be more,
he can do more.
He reminded me so much of his dad. Like, he looks so much like his dad too. I was like, wow, man.
I thought he looked like Jeremy Irons. I kept thinking, man, he really looks like Jeremy Irons.
I was he looked like his dad. Like, he looked like, senior. I was like, wow.
I mean, both Murphy and Downey Jr. look like they lost a lot of weight for these movies.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
But especially it's a great contrast, because Murphy looks, I don't want to say, like I said, like, Downey Jr. makes it look so easy, but there's a smoothness to it that he does. It just looks like he fits into that character no matter what. It looks like Murphy is just tortured all the time. like he is just like, there's nothing easy about this role. Like, if I mean, this looks like a movie part that, I mean, I hope it's not true, but it looks like a movie part that is like going to haunt him as a person for a long time.
Yeah.
Because he had to go there. Kind of like Heath Ledger and Joker, like, he had to go there.
Yeah.
And that's probably not easy to come back from.
No, I was wondering that too. No, I mean, I'm looking forward to a rewatch. Kind of like what I did with Tenet. Like, I saw it in theaters, and then when it was available for like home use,
put some headphones on so you could hear it.
I watched it again with subtitles, so I'm looking forward to kind of watching it again, like alone or just with my husband, because he wasn't with me, so he hasn't seen it yet. And just really seeing how I feel. Like maybe it was the experience, maybe because I was with people, you know, like I was with friends, and then our IMAX screening was sold out and we were like fifth row, so we were really close to the screen. Like, so maybe like all these things factored into why I wasn't like emotionally invested. I honestly didn't like the frame story of like the hearings. Like they build, and then to me they're kind of much ado about nothing. Like they kind of just like I don't know, like you're supposed to get catharsis that Robert Downey Jr., that Strauss gets his comeuppance, but like not really. Like
right. And because it comes out of the blue, you're kind of like, why is he? We still don't know why Raimi's character did that. Like we don't know
exactly.
Why,
and like that,
so
and I think
it comes out of nowhere.
That goes with the like revolving door of kind of characters.
There's a lot of things that are done here that are not from other characters that we don't ever get.
I was wondering why Raimi, and I was expecting a flashback to where Raimi like overhears Strauss, or Raimi overhears something Oppenheimer says, and that changes
or the aide worked like, or Strauss's aide, because it looked like he was in on that. Like he was like in on it, like going up against Strauss.
And I love that, and I thought he was underutilized as well. Like I thought there was so much potential, and I realize it's not like, it's a weird kind of ensemble film because it's not really an ensemble film.
No, it's they're all orbiting one guy. They're all like moons in orbit rather than like a group effort. It's I agree.
So, but I'm looking forward to watching it again, and I didn't hate it. So people out there yelling at me, I just
don't yell at her. Don't even if she did hate it, don't yell at her. Like it's okay. It's all right.
We could point her to the podcast so they could yell at her there.
Yeah. Well, maybe, whatever. Mike, what about you? Is there anything else about the movie that really stood out for you, either good or bad?
No, the characterization of Oppenheimer was great. I think that, was the reason you go to it. And I'm glad that, they didn't end the movie with the bomb being dropped, or the testing. I think that would have been just like, I loved how he was haunted from that point on, from when they dropped the bombs on Japan. And because he was like, at first he was like, no, you don't have to do it. Germany surrendered, you don't have to, we don't have to do this now. And the general was like, nope, we still have to do it. And it was just real interesting because when he was at that, pep rally or something to celebrate the bombs being dropped and everything, and him looking around and him seeing people with their faces being peeled off, or the burnt bodies, and he changed from that point on. He was almost like, I let the genie out of the bottle, I am now death, type thing. And it was interesting and such. I agree, the parts about the hearing about him losing his clearance, that was a little too much, I think. And I could have easily seen them doing, just saying, it be a sidebar or something, oh, you lost your clearance because of your past and everything. I don't think they needed to go into as much detail with that. The Senate hearings, I guess you needed that to show that Robert Downey Jr.'s character was not a nice guy, that he wasn't Oppenheimer's friend as they were trying to make him out to be with colleagues and everything. And it was just that I could understand. But Robert Downey Jr. was just amazing in this movie. I thought he blew it away, and it was good to see him up on the screen again, not playing Tony Stark, not playing Sherlock Holmes, or and he was great. And if he doesn't get nominated for best supporting actor for this role, it'll be, he'll be robbed. I just, and that's the thing with summer movies, is a lot of times the Academy doesn't recognize summer movies and such. Their memory is short. And so I'll be very curious to see what comes out of that and everything. And, I'll be interested to see where it goes. I saw a review that did say oh, the movie was like 45 minutes too long. And it's like they had to make it longer, that long because they needed so much to fit in. They couldn't go on, all right, here's him just already working on the Manhattan Project. Here they dropped the bomb. Boom, he got the, award from Lyndon Johnson. Boom, he dies. Okay, that's the movie. So, they had to tie it into it and everything. So I do understand.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a preference. I mean, I didn't feel like it was long because like I said, it flew by for me.
Mhm.
However, if I was going into it looking at the story, the third part of the hearings with Strauss, that's not really an Oppenheimer focused event, right? Like I'm like, why is that? I mean, it's great to see Robert Downey Jr., but maybe we could have used less of that and more of, you know, support characters or whatever.
It
So
was, but it was interesting too with the hearings and everything. And when he got voted, oh, who voted against me? And they said, oh, this newcomer, the senator from Massachusetts, John Kennedy. And it's
yeah,
like,
I mean, Kennedy gets a name drop in there, which is like,
it's
whatever.
like, yeah, I was like,
That doesn't go anywhere, obviously, because it's the end. But I wanted to point out too, my favorite part, like when I watched the trailers for this movie, the one thing that was intriguing to me was that they showed in the trailer, they showed Oppenheimer chatting or meeting with Albert Einstein. And I was like, I don't care about the rest of the movie. That's a conversation that I want to hear. Like, that's a conversation that I want to hear. And what's really fun is that it's in the first part of the movie. It's in the first 10 minutes of the movie, and yet we don't hear it. And I'm like, oh man, Chris, you're killing me. You're killing me. And of course, later on, I kind of knew that from history or whatever that, Einstein was asked or whatever to be part of Manhattan Project. He was like, nope, I'm not going to be part of that. The other encounter with him was pretty interesting when he's kind of helping out with the math a little bit or whatever. But then the very last scene, I do think the movie sticks the landing for me personally because we do get that conversation between Albert and Robert, and I'm like, and it's perfect. Tom Conti as Albert Einstein nails it. I think he's amazing in this. I think Tom Conti is one of those actors that doesn't get near enough credit. And he's great in this. He just kind of immerses himself into that role. You just see Einstein. And that ending conversation that they have did not disappoint me whatsoever. I thought that was a perfect way to end it for me personally, because that was what I was most interested in seeing. So I think that was great the way that wrapped up. And the fact that, Albert was like, they're gonna hate you because you're gonna give them something and then they're gonna turn on you and all of that. And um it was just a really, really wonderful way to end it and a nice way to bookend it. And you get the two probably most, I mean, look, there were tons of Nobel Prize winners in that cast, like as far as characters, right?
of course.
But I mean, pop culture wise, historically, Oppenheimer, Einstein, those are names that everybody's going to know forever. And to have those be like the figures at the beginning and at the end of the movie, I think really was a great way to bookend it. So I credit Chris for that. So overall, I credit Chris on a pretty great movie experience. Especially when you combine that with Barbie. Uh, so yeah, looks like we're all kind of mixed in a little different place on this one, but that's cool. I like hearing from everybody and what they thought. And like most Nolan movies, this is a film that, a year from now we could all watch it again and we could be in totally different places.
Oh, very much so. And not be
So
in the fifth row of the movie theater. So it's even good.
absolutely. So I will say too, if you get the chance, it's still on the big screen, it's still on IMAX, it's still in 70 millimeters. See it that way. I know it's a little bit more money, but damn, that's the way. I mean, movies look so good that way, and Nolan does it better than anybody, I think. If I had the opportunity to see Barbie that way, I'd love to do that too. But nobody makes 70 millimeter movies like that, like Nolan, anyway. Um, so yeah, I think that's it for now. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to close out the show.
Awesome. Hey, YouTube folks. All right, we got some cool stuff to talk about tonight and everything. It's interesting because they touched on a lot of different points in history in this movie. And, it felt like, some of the timelines were rushed. And I'm glad they didn't go into the whole McCarthy era of the communist hunt and stuff like that, because that could have been another 3 hours right there on that. Question for you guys, though, with the history of this movie, was there anything, any era of the film that you felt like they glossed completely over, or that they should have gone into further in it? Say just to say you have the Nolan cut, a 5-hour version of this, and that they could have expanded on. Was there any part of it that you thought they should have expanded on?
So I realize that this isn't the point of the movie. The point of the movie is called Oppenheimer and not Los Alamos, right? I think Nolan goes out of his way to indicate that there were like indigenous peoples nearby, but that there was like a 40-mile radius where there wasn't anybody. And there were like 200,000 people living in that area that had to be relocated. And because they were non-white people, they were like given like 24 hours. Their stuff was destroyed. Like they were not compensated for moving, right? They were not provided like other places to stay. And I think like not just the Japanese thing, but the indigenous and like Latino population in Los Alamos and what happened to them was also affected, from what I've heard, also affected Oppenheimer's point of view on like what he was doing and what they ultimately created. And it was a huge like proponent of him being like anti-nuclear war and everything later on, of how they, due to how they treated like the people of Los Alamos. So I thought that was kind of, I think you could have shown like hard-heartedness of like the government moving people out and stuff in a scene that was like 5 or 10 minutes. Like, what's another 5 or 10 minutes, honestly? Or cut 5 minutes somewhere and insert 5 or 10 minutes about this like absolute like ejection of an entire like population of people. But again, I know the movie's about Oppenheimer, but that affected him because he later says, give Los Alamos back to the Indians, right? His words, not mine. And if you're making a point of saying like, oh, no one's around and then give the land back, I feel like you needed to have actually shown maybe what was actually happening with the people there.
Oh,
because
sure.
it was not uninhabited.
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not. Ashley, what about you?
Well, that's a really good answer. I feel like I can't really top what Lauren said, but something that would also be interested to me is like thinking of his legacy and like how his children felt about like growing up with him as their father. Again, it's like one of those things, like how long can the movie be? But I would be really curious about that, to see how his notoriety affected his children, like what they thought of his legacy. It seems like maybe they weren't the most involved parents, which is also, I think,
That's
like parenting, has changed culturally how we look at it. But just curious to think about like, if I had grown up and one of my parents had invented like this device that basically kicked off a continuing saga of nuclear escalation, like how would you feel? Something about like how his family felt about his legacy would have been kind of interesting to explore, I think.
Sure. Definitely. Mr. Mike.
One of the things that, this is not something I don't know if I would have want explored more, but one of the things I've seen heavily criticized, because I don't know if any of it is actually the way it happened, but Oppenheimer's meeting with Truman, it makes Truman look out to be like really horrible. Like I I don't know if that was based in any sort of reality or if that was some sort of spite or something, because it seemed pretty vicious as far as the depiction of Truman on there.
Played by Gary Oldman too.
And excellently played by Gary Oldman,
Yeah.
actually. I mean, I didn't have a problem with Oldman's performance, but I mean, like, yeah, it's not showing him in the best light and everything. And I'm not naive enough to think that, Truman was a saint or anything else like that, but I did kind of wonder. That was the one thing in the movie that I kind of put a red flag and went, is that true? Because it feels mean. It feels really mean, and maybe it's justified that it's mean, but it feels like it's a shot at Truman, at a guy who can't really defend himself. So I don't know, because the rest of the movie has other depictions of characters, some good, bad, whatever, and they seem to be more grayish and not really mean spirited, even though a lot of these people aren't portrayed. Maybe like Strauss, for example, I don't know if he was that bad of a guy or not, but at least he's given some sort of balance with his character, whereas Truman is just shown to be like just a jerk, and I don't know if that was warranted.
No, totally understand that. Totally understand that. For me, I was thinking about it is how nonchalant some of the scientists were at the testing, at the actual test drop. And like, oh, I'm gonna be in my car just watching this. It's like,
I'm like, I would not be in my car.
yeah.
I mean,
And,
like
and
guys,
they
like, I don't need shades, I have glass. It's like, what's going to protect you from the
exactly,
glass? I'm like, oh,
exactly. The shockwave should have just shattered the windshield or something.
absolutely. I would
And
have been like, nope,
there was no safety glass back then, folks.
nope.
So it would have been just interesting to see. But I thought that was just so powerful when the bomb actually blew up. You saw the glow and everything of it, and the fire just rising up and everything. But then you didn't hear anything, and then all of a sudden, and it was just amazing. The whole building shook, and it was just like wow and everything. And I don't. The other thing I would have wanted to see, and this is kind of sad and sick of me, but what happened to a lot of these folks and everything? Did they get radiation poisoning from the testing? Did they have, what happened? How many of them ended up with cancer? Because I know Oppenheimer ended up passing away from throat cancer, and in what I think it was 1967.
They all smoke like chimneys.
Well, yeah, that was just the era of that,
I know. Well, especially like if you got the stress of working on the bomb and everything like that. I mean, he was probably just like smoking like multiple packs an hour.
Oh, he went from having a cigarette in his hand to having a pipe,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
like
Cigarette,
left and
pipe,
right.
pipe, cigarette. He switched them all around.
And but it was just interesting, and it was just like seeing all those people just laying on the ground and facing the other direction, but no protection, nothing. And it was just like wow. And they just I know of some of the nuclear tests later that they had soldiers get even closer just because they wanted to see what their reaction to the bomb blast and everything would be to them. It's just horrible to think about.
And what everything, like, all the other pressure to get this done before the Nazis, to do this, to do that, the race, and is it going to work, and how can we fix this, and how can we do that? The one thing that I also really got really interested in me too is like, the one guy brings up the point like, well, there is a possibility that when this goes off, we could ignite the atmosphere and the Earth could be destroyed.
Yep.
And later on, when he conveys that to Matt Damon's character, it's like, it's kind of humorous, but it's also like they didn't know. Like, they had no idea what was going to happen. I mean, they had some idea, they were theorists, right? But until they pushed that button, they had no clue what was going to happen. And that, I mean, God, how scary is that?
Oh yeah. Wow.
When they did the little test, Matt Damon's like, so what have we learned here, boys and girls? And they're like, one guy goes, we're gonna have to be a few hundred yards further.
And just to think about, like, this is probably not the first time this type of discussion has been had behind closed doors with
Right.
government. So it's like, maybe it's probably better that I don't know, like, how many potentially
we've come
world-ending scenarios are out there. Like, we were breezed by an asteroid. Like, I'm kind of okay being in the dark, actually.
Exactly. It's just crazy to hear about.
I did
Good
like
point.
the guy's hand was shaking though. The poor
Yes.
guy whose
Yes.
job it was to hit the button. Like, I don't know how he got that job. Unless that was the character I'm thinking of. But regardless,
It
like,
is. It was the character.
Yeah. But the fact that like his hand like was shaking and he like almost didn't press it, like that was I liked that. That was well done.
I was kind of surprised too, because they, I guess historically he pressed the button, but I'm like, in the movie, you'd think it's going to be Oppenheimer because like I'm the guy, I want to press the button, right? But they didn't do it that way. So I thought that was kind of nice.
I'm glad they didn't do it that way because it made it more realistic.
Sure.
And that there was a level and everything. And you even saw at the beginning, like Oppenheimer was not great in a lab. He was great with the numbers, but he was not great, doing the chemistry experiments and such with it. And it was just awesome to see that. And to, when they were doing the whole thing with the bomb, it was just like, it was almost nerve-wracking. I was like, okay, push the button already. It's time. It's time.
It's launch.
Exactly. And so it was just like, and it's like the drama that Nolan did on that part was excellent and everything.
Yeah, I thought the bomb detonation sequence was great. I thought it was really skillfully handled and it worked for me. I've heard people complain that it wasn't spectacular enough or whatever, but I'm like, it felt real to me. It felt earned. It didn't, like, any sort of big CG boom would have just been silly, I think, at that point.
Right.
It's like, what more do you want? Like, the government is not going to let Christopher Nolan set off an actual atomic bomb. So, like, you cannot get any more method than what he did.
Have you seen there's like a meme going around of like people's Google searches, and one of them was Oppenheimer real guy, and then did Nolan set off a real bomb in Oppenheimer? And it's like, I think the headline is like, we're not gonna make it, folks. Like, we're not gonna make it as a species. Like, we have people that are Googling like,
yep,
did Nolan really set off a bomb? Like,
yeah, Nolan almost destroyed the planet making this movie.
Well, remember,
enjoy.
They had a 0.0.1% chance of actually igniting the atmosphere, that they were almost sure that it wasn't going to do that.
Yeah. Near zero.
Near zero. Yeah. Well, what do you want? It's like, it's near zero. It's like a zero would be nice. Yeah. I have to say too, though, a lot's been made that the budget, the box office was 180 million, and that was great for a movie like this. And that's sort of like, I got to give credit to Christopher Nolan, not only for the way he makes movies and all that kind of stuff, but the budget was so low for this movie. Yeah. Only $100 million to make this movie. I mean,
wow.
I mean, that's, especially with the cast involved and everything like that. I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, he's already made almost twice the money back from it. So, I mean, he's really a skilled filmmaker. And this is a guy who, he said, screw you, Warner Brothers, I'm going to work somewhere else. Universal said, hey, if the studios don't behave, I could see Chris going, you know what, I'm just going to make independent movies or small movies or whatever. And I bet he'll still make incredible movies.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. I don't doubt completely. No, it was definitely worth seeing. And we definitely, it was interesting. And this is one I do want to watch again. I might actually, go try to see it at an IMAX instead of just a large screen, and just so we could get the chance of doing that and everything. So
cool.
Who knows? Folks at home, please, YouTube folks, let us know what you guys thought. We definitely would love to hear from you. Okay, that's going to wrap up the show for tonight. folks at home, thank you for joining us tonight. This was a good one to talk about. And, there was no way we could have done a 3-hour podcast talking about scene by scene of the movie. We were thinking
we could
about it for a little bit. We've done that in the past, but not tonight, and I don't know, some of the scenes I think we could have cut out, so it would have been okay. But it's awesome that you guys joined us tonight. And let's thank our crew for joining us tonight. Lauren, you made it through your first episode with us. Yay.
I did it. Yay. It was so fun.
Thank you for having us. So thank you for being here, actually.
Thank you for having you're welcome. Now thank you for
it's awesome,
Thank you for inviting me and having me on. And I hopefully it won't be another 13 years before before I'm back.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. This was awesome. I really liked it. Anything you want to shout out about or promote?
I just want to promote my own socials and stuff again. I'm on Twitter and Letterboxd and Instagram as That Movie Is Fine. And then also I do have my podcast, That Movie Is Fine, the podcast with my friend Aaron Hudson. And we have a Facebook page and an Instagram, That Movie Is Fine podcast. And we're wherever podcasts are sold.
That is awesome. Find it at wherever your fine podcasts are found. She's even there. It's awesome. So it's awesome. And Ashley Pauls, thank you so much as always.
Oh, thank you. It's always so much fun to chat movies. You're my favorite people to talk about movies with.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, my dear. Anything you want to shout out about?
Yeah, just as mentioned previously, I sadly did not get to participate in Barbenheimer, but I am planning to do belated. I'm seeing Barbie later this week, and we'll put my thoughts up on the ESO blog. So looking forward to seeing
Can't wait to
a
see
very different film.
Land.
Yes.
This will be
maybe not as different as you think.
Oh, interesting. Intriguing.
Exactly. There might be a bomb or two in Barbie. Oh, never mind. I won't say anything.
Yeah. No spoilers. Yeah.
No. And Mr. Mike Gordon, we've made it through another one, my friend.
We did, and as always, it's my pleasure.
Anything you want to shout out about, sir?
Yeah. Before I get to that too, I gotta give Lauren credit for being on brand by saying for Oppenheimer, her that movie was fine. She's right on brand there. So I appreciate that. Look, it seems like Substack is taking off. I see a lot of people have newsletters, sort of blog things with Substack or whatever, and I'm sort of making my way, and a lot of people I know are doing that sort of thing. But one person of interest that I think that deserves a particular shout out is Millie D. Chirico, who used to be a programmer at TCM. She did the TCM Underground. She wrote recently came out with a book. Well, she got dismissed late last year from TCM unceremoniously, and she's still struggling to figure out what her next chapter is going to be. But she has recently started a Substack newsletter. It's called Professional Sweetheart. It's based on one of her favorite movies. If you know TCM, if you know classic movies, you probably know where that movie title came from. If you don't, Google it. But I've always, I appreciate her opinion, and it's probably going to be as fun as her programming was on TCM Underground. I expect nothing less for this Substack newsletter to be fun as well. She's going to talk about, her feelings about different movies and bring some cult classics to people's attention, et cetera, et cetera. So it should be a fun time. So I'll have a link in the show notes, but if you go to Substack, put in Professional Sweetheart, and you should be able to pull it up.
Awesome. Definitely looking forward to reading about that one. All right, my shout out real quick is to the fine folks who braved San Diego Comic-Con, folks. It was a weird year for it this time. All the big studios pulled out, and it was a true Comic-Con for once. And I have a couple friends who actually went, and they could not give me enough raves about how fun it was this year. And it was, back to the basics. It still was packed. There was still over 100,000 people. And, it was, tons of stuff galore going on, panels going on. A lot of the, Hall H stuff was completely out. But there were other panels going on. There were other announcements that happened at the show, but just not the official stuff like normal. And so it was very interesting to do. And I think eventually we're going to have to go back out to San Diego for another visit. And I think it would be a ton of fun to do it in the next year or two. So you never know.
I heard a lot of great things about this year as well, from professionals, from colleagues as well. People who sold a lot of stuff. They did the panels were popping. I know that certainly the comic panels and everything were well attended. But in particular, I did find it interesting that, I don't know, I guess the studios or whatever are trying to get around certain things. In Hall H, they had a big premiere, I guess, promotional thing for a Bollywood sci-fi big budget movie that's coming out. So obviously they're not connected with SAG or anything like that. So but I mean, that's a good way to, I mean, with films from Bollywood and India coming out and being really exciting, like RRR was last year. I'm certainly excited to see this as well, and I'm glad that space was not wasted this weekend. Instead, it was used to, some see it as getting around certain things, but I think it was just a nice use of that space.
Yep, exactly. Hall H is big, so they might as well use it as a big movie theater or viewing room. It would also always be good instead of having to wait 10 hours to get into Hall H. So it's a plus, my friends. It's truly, truly a plus. So definitely thank you everybody for listening. It's always great to be able to join friends talking about movies, talking about geeky stuff. And that's what we've just been doing. And, always remember, we couldn't do this without you. If you want to support the podcast, please check out our Tee-Public store, where we got really cool ESO Network swag. And we got a couple other designs coming out. We got some new stuff that I've been playing around just with new designs, new ideas for, when I get new ideas in my head, I just usually put it onto a t-shirt. So it's kind of cool. So we'll be having more and more of that kind of stuff up on our Tee-Public store. You can find the Tee-Public store very easily by either going to the Earth Station One website or to the ESO Network website and clicking on Tee-Public right on the top. Super simple. And we also have an ad. So we are on the side of our podcast page on Earth Station One. So definitely check it out, or go to Tee-Public and so say Earth Station One. We're there. So you can find us. Also, remember, if you want to listen to our show for the rest of the world, why not check out the ESO Network Patreon? For as little as $1 a month, you could help support us here at Earth Station One. Check out the ESO Network Patreon at patreon.com/ESO Network. We want to hear from you guys at home, so feedback at earthstation1.com is the best way to find us, or to write us at least. Remember, you could also find Earth Station One wherever fine podcasts are found. And now Earth Station One is up on YouTube. That's right, folks. You get to see these lovely faces every week. It's pretty cool. Some of us are more tired. Some of us are like going, oh, what a day. But we're always happy to be able to see you guys and everything. And remember, if you get a chance, hit the like and subscribe button. It's always the best way to follow up with us. And it shows that you guys get to listen and to get pointing down. That's right. Or if you want, click on the little star up at the top and you get to know when we come to you, because we're coming to you now twice a week, not just once a week, but twice a week. So yes, folks, more work for me. It's awesome. It's great. It's always good to be able to edit. It's always great to be able to give you better content, more content than ever before. So it's pretty cool with that. Please, just subscribe. We're not too proud to beg on this show. We really aren't. On behalf of myself, of course, Mike Faber, Mr. Mike Gordon, Ms. Ashley Pauls, and Ms. Lauren Knight, thank you so much for joining us, folks. Thank you for listening. We will see you here next time on the Earth Station One podcast. Peace, and we are done. Boom!
You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.